Hello, everyone. This is Rick, and welcome to Astral Club. This episode is Robert Monroe's Astral World. Before we get into it, if you'd like to support this channel on Patreon, you get no commercial advance videos on Sunday and an email where we can talk back and forth and you can tell me your experiences, ask questions. If you're interested in that, you'll find a link in the description. Next up, private lessons. If you'd like a private astral projection lesson with me, be glad to work with you. You'll find an email in the description where you can request further information. I think most of the people listening to this particular episode are fairly well aware of Robert Monroe. But for anyone who is not, Robert Monroe was the modern day groundbreaking individual who brought astral projection, out of the body travel to the masses here in North America and around the world. He built himself an institute in Virginia for the study and the education of people interested in astral projection. And I attended that institute in the 80s and was lucky enough to meet Bob and to actually, we actually talked for about an hour and a half, just one-on-one. It was a dream come true for me. So he was you can definitely say a role model for me. And as I read his books, he gave words to many of the things that I had previously experienced in all my years of astral projection before I actually read his first book, Journeys Out of the Body, that actually in 1972 brought me into a world that I thought only I lived in. But after reading that book, I found that, wow, this is something that's been going on for a long time, and there were many others out there who were experiencing similar types of astral projections, but we were a very isolated community back then. Without the internet, there really was very few islands of astral projection knowledge that you could locate. For the most part, you felt very much alone. So whenever he released a new book, I would obviously grab it, buy it, and read it cover to cover as soon as possible. One of the things that Bob Monroe did that helped, I think, the astral projection field is he developed a number of terms that he assigned to various things, person, places, or things, even verbs, I suppose, in the astral world. Now, you can come up with your own words if you like. Before I had read some of his stuff, I had my own words, but I figured probably the easiest thing to do is to use his terminology. Because after all, he was kind of the father of modern astral projection, and his terms would be just as easy to use as anything that I could come up with, and they're more widely disseminated, so it's easier to communicate using these terms. And I'm going to review some of them with you now, and you've heard some of these from me already if you've been following this channel for any length of time. But I think you'll find it interesting to get this little view into Monroe's head. First up is time-space illusion, or TSI. This is a very, very in-depth concept. Actually, I could do a whole episode on it and still not cover it. But for the purposes of this episode, let's just say that the time-space illusion is essentially our physical world. Our physical world seems solid. It seems real. It seems to come complete with its own set of rules. You have the speed of light, which you cannot exceed in normal space. We have seemingly enormous distances between various celestial bodies. All of these things tend to be immutable. They're things that we all buy into. But what Monroe said, and what I believe as well, is that all of this is an illusion. Uh, the speed of light, all of that's an illusion that seems very real to us. But once you enter the astral, you begin to realize, or at least the illusions begin to break down. For instance, the ability to travel in space nearly instantaneously should be impossible because, according to the time-space illusion rule about the speed of light, nothing should be able to travel faster than the speed of light in any kind of normal space. And the astral world really should mirror some of that stuff. However, it doesn't. So why doesn't it? Why can I get to another star in virtually an instant? Well, what that points to, and this is probably why it should have its own episode, it points to the fact that something's wrong. Something's misunderstood. Because this cheat code, if you will, that enables you to travel almost instantaneously anywhere in space shouldn't be possible. But let's say that our universe is some sort of time-space illusion, some extremely sophisticated holographic universe. Well, if that program was running and you had a cheat code, for instance, astral projection, then it would allow you to go from the beginning of the dungeon game that you're playing, and then using that cheat code, you could theoretically then go right to the end of the game. Because you realize that it's just a game, and that even though the rules seem to be immutable in this little video game, you have a cheat code. Therefore, you can get around those rules. That's the time-space illusion in probably its most simplistic form. Next up, the M band. Now, we're all familiar with physical pollution. Our industrial society and the burning of fossil fuels has caused quite an amount of pollution to occur in our atmosphere. Now picture the astral plane. Now, you don't have smog made up of various petrochemical particulates in the astral, no. But what you have in this M band is what might be considered noise or uncontrolled thoughts. And these uncontrolled thoughts are like bits of radio programs just buzzing around an area around the Earth. And when you enter the M band, you literally have to, and at this point I just do it unconsciously, you have to tune down your receptivity, telepathically speaking. Otherwise you get inundated with, imagine listening to 1,000 radio stations all at once. That gives you an idea as to what it's like. So this M band is around our planet in the astral. And as long as you have huge amounts of humans just spilling their thoughts out all over the place, you're going to have the M band. Next up is one of my favorites, ident. Now, Monroe defines ident as a mental name or address, an energy pattern of an item. I think of idents very much like that. Really, anything that's a noun, person, place, or thing, can have an ident. This mental name or address, once you have the ident, you can go to that person, that place, or to some extent that thing. How do you get an ident? How do you grab onto it? Well, imagine, if you will, being in a meditative state, either on the astral or, if you haven't projected, on the physical. Then project yourself mentally to a favorite friend or family member. What does it feel like to be with that person? Well, the smells, the sights, the sounds, the emotions that you experience. All those things together make up this mental name or address. Because that person has an energy pattern. And once you have that captured and can call upon it when needs be, you can travel to that person. And the same thing occurs with places or things. If you can dwell in a place, even in the physical, if you can meditate in that place and absorb everything concerning that place, the temperature, the smells, how you feel, your emotions, sad, happy, whatever. If you can capture all of that, you are capturing the ident. And with that information, you can will yourself back to that place. And that can be in the physical, astral, mental, whatever planes you seek to travel through. Next up is a rote. This is another interesting and very important concept. Monroe calls it a thought ball, or a packet of thought, mentation, total memory, or knowledge, information, experience, history. When you're on the astral, you communicate telepathically. However, once you get to a point where you're communicating with another astral being that is advanced, they can send you a rote, which if you then open yourself up, and this is why you have to trust the individual you're taking this rote from. It's just like if somebody serves you food, you had better trust that person because the food might be poisoned. But if you trust this person who is sending you this rote, what you're going to get from them is something infinitely more complex than what we humans typically think of as telepathy. A rote is much more well-rounded, much more detailed in the most realist way you can think. If you get a rote from someone about being on a beach in Cozumel, Mexico, you don't just get the idea of it. You don't just get a picture of it. As you delve into the rote, you become the first person player here. You're experiencing what it's like lying on that beach in the sun in Cozumel, the smells, the sights, the sounds, the feeling of the cold drink in your hand. All of that becomes part of your overall experience. It is as if you were the person who'd had that experience. Run the rote simply means to access the information in the rote rather. Percept. He uses that as a way to talk about insight, intuition, understand. For instance, if you're communicating with another being and it's explaining to you what it's like on this planet, you might say, oh, I get that percept. That's pretty much what it means. Closed. Closed means to tune down or out external stimuli. I experienced this in a very real way when I traveled about 500 million years into the future. And if you've reviewed that episode of mine, you know that I was stranded there for quite a while. And I had begun to lose hope that I could return. And after some losses, I fell into an extremely deep depression. A depression that's probably not even possible on a physical level. Because when you're in your physical body, you still have to feed occasionally. You still have to use the bathroom. But when you're in the astral, those things don't affect you. And when I closed down, I think of it as going into a deep shell where for some period of time, you are completely unaware. You have shut down or you are closed. He also uses the term flickered when he's explaining some of his concepts. That simply just means uncertain. For instance, an entity says to you, oh, it's like that on this place, and this is why it is. And you don't get the concept or the percept. So you flicker, meaning you're uncertain about this information. Click. That's just a word that he uses to explain instantaneous changes in consciousness. So when you're in the astral, you might be, like I said, for instance, on the astral version of that beach in Cozumel. And then you will yourself to instantly go to New York City. So you might say that, oh, I was on this beach in Cozumel and it was beautiful, and then click, I was in New York City. Blank. Blank simply means you don't understand what's being communicated here. Turn in. Turn in means consider, think over. Pretty simple. Vibrate. Now, he says he used it as show emotion. However, this is one area that I think has evolved over the decades after Monroe passed. Typically today, when one vibrates or increases your vibratory level, what you're doing is you are functioning at a much higher level as your vibrational frequencies increase. Typically, the way one increases one's vibratory level is by thinking pure, loving thoughts and then willing yourself to those higher levels. The converse of that is to think, I guess you could think violent thoughts or depressing thoughts. Those would do the reverse and bring your vibratory level down. Next up, smooth. He said that meant get it together, in charge of self. So let's say you get a rote, and this rote is wild, and maybe you blanked, maybe you flickered, and then you thought it through, calmed yourself down a bit, got centered, so you smoothed. That's how he used it. Dulled. Dulled simply means you lost interest. And you can tell that too. It's an interesting word because if you're speaking with an entity and it starts to lose interest, it begins to kind of fade in and out. So that's a very good word for dealing with a situation where perhaps you're boring something. Lighted. That just means happy, enthusiastic. Next up, rolled, which means amused, laughing. It's interesting. When you experience a huge amount of humor, your vibratory level can actually flicker back and forth. And I guess you could say that you're kind of rolling. So maybe that's where he got that from. Curl. That's what he calls an organized energy, a usually intelligent individual, and it's local slang. This I've never really used or experienced before. I think it's kind of like saying guy, something like that. And then finally, the word plied. He used that to describe the way things are. It goes with the territory. For instance, let's say you're an Earth person and you're talking with someone from another planet, and you're explaining that here on Earth we struggle and fight against one another, and we grasp over resources, and we cut each other's throats, and all the rest of this kind of stuff. And then you just say it like that's just the way things are, and no big deal. And perhaps the alien entity that you're talking to might react like that's insane, that's crazy. And then you would just be like, that's I plied. That's the way it is. It's plied. There you go. At any rate, those are some of the words that Robert Monroe used in his book, Future Journeys. And you'll see me use, some of these terms when, when I'm describing some of my experiences. And if you ever decide to read all of Robert Monroe's books, other than just Journeys Out of the Body, Far Journeys is certainly a very, very interesting book. And it was light years ahead of his experiences that he detailed in Journeys Out of the Body. Now, if you found that amusing, please hit the like button, share it with those of like minds, subscribe If you haven't already, make sure that bell's on. I want to hear your questions and comments. And as always, this is Rick, and I will see you on the astral plane.